If you assume that satisfied employees are 100% productive, what do you think the ratio is for those who are dissatisfied? 71%. It's pretty significant. And what do you think the number is if you are engaged? Okay, wait until you see the number that's inspired. What do you think that number is? 225. Until you can invent a 25-hour day or an 8-day work week, you are not going to deliver that level of productivity. You get it by creating an environment where people feel inspired.
And with that, we welcome Angela Cheng-Cimini. So glad to have you. Welcome to the CEO series. As we say, good morning, good evening, depending upon what part of the world you're in. If it's Friday, it is the CEO series. So welcome. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Great to be here. Thank you, Ron, for having me.
I'm glad to have you here. You know, you and I have been knowing each other for some time, but it's glad to have. It's great to have a one-on-one and kind of walk us through that. So we always start our discussion about the career journey, CHRO. As you think about what your CHRO for Harvard Business Publishing, that's high level when you think about it. Walk us through that journey, getting there.
I wasn't sure that I was going to hit that mark, actually. So I studied HR as a college undergraduate, got my first internship, and knew I had found my calling. And actually, it was my father who discovered that track of study. I didn't know, you're 17 or 18. Who knows what they want to do with their life? Nobody. But I knew I wasn't fit for science or math, and I knew it was going to be something business or people oriented. So we found this curriculum at the Cornell University, the Industrial and Labor Relations School.
Very well known. Yes.
And so I fell into the HR track and just really, really loved it. Loved the variety, the diversity, right? One day you're a therapist, one day you're a lawyer, the next day you're a strategist. And so my sequence is not terribly linear. Sometimes I move laterally, sometimes I took a step back. I've never been anywhere longer than mostly 3 years. My latest stint at Harvard was 3.5.
Okay.
Different sectors. So consumer product goods. I've been working at museums. I've been in media. I've been in automotive technology, but always HR.
Okay.
I took an expat gig in London with Crabtree and Evelyn, and I had to cut that stint short for personal reasons. And I needed to sort of take a little bit of a step back after that. Went to a much smaller organization, a startup. And I thought, this with a relatively unknown organization. I thought, well, this is okay. I'm doing it for the right personal reasons. But then the Harvard Business Publishing opportunity landed in my lap. And so sometimes it's right place, right time.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's just good fortune.
It is. And that branding of Harvard has a different level of cachet when you think about that.
Yeah, people think I'm a lot smarter than I am.
Come on. Come on. I mean, I looking at the video, I saw you live when we were in Toronto. I saw you live, so I know the impact of that as you walk through that, capturing audience, being on stage, exuding the level of confidence and sharing knowledge. All of that's important. So when you look back on starting and choosing to go into Cornell, which is very well known in their HR department, and building that out, what were some pivotal moments as you were making those? You said it was not linear. You made a left turn here, right turn here. What was a pivotal moment in proceeding into that journey?
I think what I learned really early on, Ron, was that I needed to be my own best advocate.
Okay.
Coming up through the ranks, I rarely saw any Asian leaders. Certainly never any female Asian leaders. And as it turns out, the most recent statistic I'm aware of is that fewer than 1% of all C-suites are occupied by female Asian leaders. Wow. There are some of very particular note. The CEO of the year by Time Magazine is a female Asian, but we're rare. And what I found was that I needed to find an environment where I felt valued and respected. And so part of the reason why my stints are about 3 years long, some of them have because the job required me to relocate and I couldn't do that, or I had to come back closer to home for family reasons. But other times it was because the environment was no longer as robust or as hospitable
Yeah.
as it once was.
Yeah.
HR plays a tough road,
Yeah.
runs a tough road. I feel that the most outstanding obligation of human resources is speaking truth to power,
Yeah.
right? We straddle the front line and we straddle the executive corner, because I think that having the perspective across the entire spectrum of the organization really informs leadership. Is your strategy sticking? Do people understand the role they play? Can they push back on pieces that don't make sense? How do they reconcile with what they're trying to do at the 30,000-foot view with what they're trying to do at the 30-foot view? And HR can really be the cohesive glue for all that. And sometimes the picture on the front line isn't so pretty when you're all the way up in your ivory tower. And so really, to keep it real, and that sometimes is very difficult to do.
I'm laughing as you're saying that, because sometimes when I read a business headline and it's like company laid off 5,000 people, hit the headlines, and I'm like, so where was HR in this discussion? Could we have maybe chosen a different process? So I'm always like a big headline reader, and I always put myself, if I was a CHRO there, and I've played that role a couple of times, how would we strategically align that? Because we could have 15,000 people working there. We could have 2,000 people working there, but that's going to impact the brand, all those kinds of things. And I'm like, so for me to hear you talk about that, yes, you get it, because how do we guide those people truth to power, that we've earned that spot and they listen to what we're saying?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, the magic exists. The lightning in the bottle is when the CEO sees you as their consigliere, right? Like trusted counsel. I'm going to speak real talk with you all the time. You're going to know that I have no other agenda other than to make you, the CEO, successful and this organization thrive.
Wow.
That is my only objective. And any program or process or plan that I put in place is in service of that. It's not an HR agenda. It's an organizational strategic agenda done through the lens of people.
Oh gosh, this is music to my ears. When you said the consigliere, and I think about The Godfather, because
Yes.
a leader told me, he says, "I want you to be my Tom Hagen." I said, "Whoa, you like The Godfather?" I want to be Tom. I want to be Tom. He said, the last person I speak to at night, at the end of the day, and the first person I speak to in the morning, my sounding board. And that was what he was looking for. But that was rare.
That's rare. Oh God, but that's beautiful when it happens, right?
God, it is, because you'll find they don't want to know from nothing, and you just that admin process police role, and that's just what they look at, this whole space around human resources. Let me ask you a question. You've been there, done that. What do you think HR should be driving towards to be that level of sounding board inside of an organization? How did you earn that?
Every interaction, whether it's with the receptionist, the custodian, or a board member. Every interaction is an opportunity to demonstrate value. And that's not necessarily making it about me.
Yeah.
It's about learning the person's name, what they do, how long they've been here, what gets them up in the morning, what keeps them up at night, getting to know the people. And sort of infamously, one of the reasons I think that I got the job at Harvard Business Publishing was I said to them, I will get to know the people in the way the CFO knows the numbers. Now that's a really high bar, because as it turned out, the CFO is a fantastic CFO. But all that to say that that's my business, right? Is to get as close to the organization as possible, because there's so much data there about how well we're doing and how well we're executing that can be had just by listening to people.
Yeah, and I'm sure that CEO says, "Whoa, first time I've ever heard that response. You're hired. You're hired, because this is what we need, someone that can carry it through that level." What was the anchor? Where did all that come from? I know, you grew up, you went to college, and you chose the field that you're in. But was there grounding someplace that I want to know people. I want to know who they are. I'm just as interested in talking to the janitor as I am with the VP in this department. Where did that come from?
Well, to be fair, a lot of it was through mistakes. I mean,
Okay.
this is wisdom that's acquired over 30 years of working, right? I mean, when I first started out, I wanted badly to demonstrate that I had all the answers, that I deserved to be here, that I was knowledgeable. And
Yeah.
so in the early days, I spoke way more than I listened. I talked way more than I should have.
Mhm.
And I quickly learned that that was not the way to build respect or build credibility, because I didn't know what I was talking about. I was all of 24. I was
Yeah.
all of 34. I was
Yeah.
all of 44. Now I'm 54.
Okay.
And I actually find that I'm speaking less, right?
Less.
Because there is so much to be learned just by listening and observing from people. And I speak when I think there's value to chime in.
My father's favorite phrase was that you learn more by listening than you do by talking. He said, "You get in a situation, just listen.
That's right.
You'll get a chance to go through everything, but you just got to learn to listen more."
Yeah. 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 To yourself and to others, right? It's not a competition for airtime.
Yeah.
It's a competition for how we make the better solution,
hmm
the so we can beat the competition, right?
Yeah.
Outside, not inside.
Yeah. Did you always want to be a leader? I mean, some
Yeah.
people.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
think I don't think you can aspire to be CHRO without a little bit of ego.
Yeah.
Ron, but it means leadership now looks very different to me than it did when I first started,
Yeah.
right? It's more about building teams.
Yeah.
It's not about me. It's about
hmm
getting results through others. It's about building and lifting other people up. That
hmm
to me is real leadership, because that's how you get people through the really difficult times, is because they have faith in you, that they know that you're in it for something bigger than themselves. And
Yeah.
that's the stuff that gets me up in the morning, right? I want to
Yeah.
work for a leader who doesn't make it all about them,
hmm
who's genuinely interested in how I'm doing, how I'm feeling, how I can grow, how I can be challenged, who can lift me up when I'm struggling. I think that's what real leadership is. And we are seeing every day, we're seeing it play out in the headlines, that we're
Exactly.
not seeing that kind of leadership.
Yeah. Yeah. I did a session this morning with a group out of APAC region, Malaysia, Singapore, and all HR people. And I asked the question, how many of you would want to become CHRO? And there was one person that said they wanted to. Everybody said, no, I just want to do what I do here, whether it's through change management, whether it's through strategic workforce planning, subject matter expert. I don't want the role of leadership. Why do you think that is? And I will always ask that question whenever I'm doing development for leadership teams. But I often wonder, why is that? At one time, I'm thinking at one time, I always wanted to be an executive in a company. But I find that a lot of the younger generation of people coming through, they said, I don't want the headache.
Oh, that's 100% true. So I think it's Gallup or Mercer, 34% of employees today don't want to be managers. And if I
Yeah,
look at my own children, that's absolutely true. They
yeah.
just want to do their thing, clock in, clock out, and get on with the rest of their life, right? Work is a means, it's not the end.
Uh,
And so we will see very quickly, organizations will see very quickly that there's going to be a leadership gap.
hmm
We have to find ways to make these kinds of roles attractive. We have to pay them well. We have to make sure that they can have work-life balance. My children look at me and they say, I don't want your headaches. I don't want your heartburn. Mom, we hear you tell the stories about these crazy people who are making these really strange decisions.
Yeah,
I'm not down for that.
yeah.
And so organizations will have a reckoning.
Mm,
But beyond sort of the unattractiveness of the burden of that, I think there is also just a lack of confidence.
yeah.
People who are worried about shouldering the mantle of being responsible for other people. And I think if with the right upskilling, with the right mentorship, with the right sponsorship, we will find that there are lots of hidden gems of leaders
Yeah.
who don't yet know that they can
Mhm.
rise.
Yeah, that we got to kind of coach them, bring them along. Because
Yes.
my daughter told me the same thing. She said, "I would never want a career that you had, but all the stress you were under and all those. I don't want that." But she's in a role now that she's managing a global kind of operation, and she's somewhat fine with that. But again, the new level of demographics coming in the workforce is totally different, and it's going to look totally different in years to come. So as you navigated that, what were some of your biggest challenges that you faced?
Hmm. So definitely being the only, right? Whether it was being the only woman leader in the team or being the only Asian in the team or being both. I don't I think I had a pretty gilded path. I don't think I ever faced explicit bias or prejudice or discrimination, but it was always something that I was aware of
Okay.
because it is so much a part of who I am, right?
Yeah.
My Asian upbringing, the
Yeah.
Eastern cultures that I bring to work, to how I show up. I'm always very aware that I
Mhm.
am not of the same lived experiences as other people around me. So it's been more of an internal battle than it has been externally. I've had the blessings of wonderful sponsors,
Mhm.
of the care and feeding of wonderful mentors. So I consider myself very, very privileged in that way,
Mhm.
which is
Mm.
why I think I'm motivated now in sort of this half or third of my career to start paying it back by paying it forward.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Cool. One of our guests just made an interesting comment. Yes, one of our listeners that tunes in every week, John Self, based in Texas. He said she needs to bottle her description of how she approaches her role as CHRO. It's one of the best I've ever heard.
Oh, well, thank
Yeah.
you. Thank you.
Thank you, John, for that. And also to Peter Piccinini, who says this is awesome, based on a comment that you were just talking about. So you talk about the challenges you face and how to navigate that. If you were coaching a younger leader, if you were coaching that team that I worked with a few hours ago, how would you coach them as to looking at their career from a different vantage point, whether it's C-suite or not, but internally learning from that? What kind of talking points would you use?
Well, so there's a philosophical model that's Japanese. It's called ikigai, and I'm
Okay.
not going to get it right, but it's basically a Venn diagram, and the sweet spot is the stuff in the middle. What are
Okay.
you good at? How can you drive value, and does the world need it? And
Mm,
so, to the extent that you can find that, that's where you will be most engaged, derive the most energy, give the most energy.
mm,
And it's sort of, the old adage, when you love what you do, it doesn't feel like work.
it doesn't. Yeah.
Um, so, it's sort of the conversations I'm having with one of my children who's a little a C right now, trying to
Yeah.
figure out what to do with her life. And she spent the past couple of years exploring, and it's been wonderful to watch her grow and build confidence. But now she's at a fork in the road. And what is she going to do? And
Yeah.
she believes she needs to commit to a career. So she's trying to figure that out. And so we've been having conversations about, what do you love to do? What are you good at? And in
Mm,
what ways does that help the world be better? Because that's important to her. And
yeah.
I love that for her.
Mm,
And so when I'm talking with early career folks, I try to walk them through that same rubric. I mean, I
yeah.
just got lucky. It came a lot sooner for me.
Yeah. Yeah. But your learning has impact because you've been through that somewhat. We had a guest on the show who started out as an auto mechanic and had built up a successful auto mechanic practice, but he always wanted to go to school to be a doctor.
Oh, wow.
And later in life, not later in life, but later on, he was taking a course because he didn't finish college. He went back and took a course, and there was one course that he did very well in it. And the professor said, "You really should think about pursuing medicine because you're very good at this,
Ah,
auto mechanic." And he was able to go home and can you imagine going home and telling your wife, "No more auto mechanic. I'm going to become a doctor." But that's what he was able to do. Dr. Carl, and I'll send you a link to his presentation. And then
amazing.
there was another doctor who we had on who was a lung transplant surgeon, and he did not want to do that anymore, and he became kind of a consultant to other doctors that were being burned out. So when you think about this, do I know what I want to do? So many times people will pursue that and then they end up later on in life because it's not linear and they end up changing and kind of, but that's okay. Could
Oh,
we?
it's more than okay. It's
Yeah.
more than okay.
Yeah.
Ron, we have fewer years ahead than behind.
Behind. Yes.
We don't have time to squander.
Yeah.
And certainly working for someone else and a job that brings you no joy
Yeah.
is no way to live.
Yeah.
Which is why I stepped down from my full-time role. I'd been doing HR for 30 years.
Yeah.
And we had 3 people in our social circle who suddenly were diagnosed with pancreatic cancer and passed away. And I didn't know anything about that diagnosis, but it's fast and it's painful.
Yeah.
And it really took me up short. And I
Mm.
realized that I needed to get off the treadmill because I
Yeah.
had been in autopilot for the last,
Yeah. Yeah.
year and a half.
Yeah.
And so now I'm working part-time for a wonderful nonprofit.
Mhm.
And finding time to do all the other things that I hope I have
Yeah.
lots of time to explore.
Yeah.
It's important.
Get a chance to really live.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
That's right.
So important in doing that. So in working for you in your department, what is your leadership style? What does that look like? How do you lead or grow or mentor people?
Oh, wow. Well, I like to think that I delegate and defer as much as possible.
Mhm.
All right. My first response, I like to say, well, what do you think? How do you think we should handle
Okay.
this?
Okay.
Because I think those are wonderful opportunities to grow, but it's also a wonderful opportunity to showcase someone else's opportunities. Again,
Mhm.
deflecting,
Mhm.
and making it not about me. I like to build consensus. I
Mm.
like to work through chaos, right? Because
Yeah.
it's really unhealthy
Yeah.
when it's left
Yeah.
unchecked. And the sooner you can resolve those issues, the better off the team will be.
Mhm.
But I'm also not afraid to make decisions.
Okay.
Because I do think that courageous leadership means leaning into sometimes you have to exercise your rank.
Mhm.
And trying to please everybody is also no path to leadership.
Exactly. Exactly. Mhm. And you're able to kind of corral that. So okay, here's where we're headed. 1, 2, 3, or whatever it is, and this is the direction we're going to move into. Um, one of one of the talking points that I love to use is that, do you enjoy Monday mornings? So everybody knows what TGIF is. So I'll ask a group if I'm giving a speech. I said TGIM. Who knows what that means? How many of you in the TGIM mode? And I'm gonna get one hand that goes up. But what I find that when people are doing that TGIM, it's for somebody that's purpose driven. You said now I'm working for a nonprofit. And that
Yeah.
nonprofit, I get an opportunity to do that. It's not the pressure of a balance sheet or P&L, but I'm doing something and I'm really, really into it.
Although I will tell you that Harvard Business Publishing is about as commercially oriented as any other nonprofit because it is a nonprofit as it's part of Harvard Business School.
Yeah.
But we were very aware of
Mhm.
our top line and our bottom line, our
Yeah.
expenses, our ins and our outs. The organization I'm with now is much smaller, but also happens to be in media. But I did find that I was dreading the M's, and now I'm looking forward to starting a new week. So
Okay.
it's been really healthy. I'm calling it my rewirement, Ron, because I'm
Okay.
way too young to be retiring.
Yeah, I love that. I love that because I'm a TGIM person. Sunday, I'm like, let's get it on. Let's go ahead to Monday and let's go ahead and do what we got to do here. And this is why sometimes when you talk to people, I had a friend of mine who was a doctor, very successful. He decided to retire. And he said, I'm going to play golf. He just got into golf. I want to play every major course across the US. I'm like, okay, I'm listening. And then I talked to him maybe 6 months later. I said, how's the golf game going? He said, that lasted about a month. He said, I got to figure something else to do because this is not for me.
Hmm.
And he was able to come back in as a part-time basis, chief medical officer on a fractional level kind of thing. And he got back into what he loved. And he said, it's a different vantage point when it's not the Monday through Friday, 9 to 5 kind of thing. And you're just kind of coming in on situations and doing that. But he found that out later in life and he was retiring.
So I had the privilege of listening to Arthur Brooks yesterday.
Okay. Okay.
The author, he's a professor of happiness. I don't know that's actually his title, but he teaches happiness at Harvard Business School to MBA students.
Mm.
And he wrote a book called Strength to Strength, and it's about basically how to find happiness in the second half of your life. And what he shared is there's a happiness curve that peaks at about 27, 28, about the age of his MBA students.
Okay.
And then it takes a decline. So I'm in the trough, about
Okay.
52, 54.
Yeah.
And the reason for that is between your 30s and your 50s, You're growing your career, you're managing your mortgage, you're working on your marriage, you probably have kids, right? It's stressful. And so you're subjugating perhaps your own happiness for others. It's not necessarily a bad thing, what we're seeing on this curve.
Yeah.
But the time you're in your mid-50s, a lot of those things have become much more manageable, or they're no longer such a pressing concern. You're much more established in your career. Hopefully your kids have left the house, right? Your marriage is now in the second honeymoon phase, and it starts to go back up until you hit about 60 and the path diverges. People either continue on the happiness trajectory or they take a decline.
Okay.
And to your point about people who retire and they have no hobbies, they take up golf because they think that's what everybody else is doing.
Yeah.
And what he tells us to do is to look for the things that give us real meaning and purpose. So friends, family, friendship, and service. And that's the key to happiness. And so I'm devoting more of my time to friends and family and friendship. And for me, service is working at this small nonprofit. I took a huge pay cut, but the work is deeply, deeply meaningful.
Yeah.
Making time for people who find me on LinkedIn and who want to just pick my brain about their careers or what HR is like. I'm happy to take all those calls.
Yeah. Yeah.
'Cause I want to make the most of it.
I love that. I say that at this stage of my life, my purpose is I want to build the next level of HR. I spent a lot of time with HR departments, a lot of time with CEOs, but my purpose is that I want to build the next level of leaders in human resources. It's completely different from the legacy of being the police and all those kinds of things. Being that business partner, playing the Tom Hagen role inside of an organization. So it's not work for me. I can't wait to log on. I found that sweet spot and I do what I do, and that's my mission.
Yeah, that's beautiful. It's
Yeah,
beautiful, Ron.
and going forward, because I came up through some HR departments. I think about it now, it gives me a headache because we were viewed as the police, had bosses that everything was so rigid and all these kinds of things. And I said, I don't ever want to do that. I want to move, beyond that. So I was able to figure this out over a period of time. So I want to talk a little about developing other people. So you're coaching, you're mentoring people. Um, what advice would you give to those who aspire to senior leadership roles? You said your daughter says, no, I don't want to do that. My daughter said, no, I don't want to do that. But let's say you have one or two people that aspire to that. What advice would you give them?
Really work on your emotional intelligence. It's not your technical prowess, right? I'm trying to switch the vernacular away from soft skills. And calling them power skills. Because I believe empathy, I believe compassion, I believe transparency, I believe those kinds of skills are the things that amplify your technical skills. Because you can be the best coder, but if nobody wants to work with you, you can't lead.
You can't.
I could know everything about HR there is to know, but if I'm difficult to work with or work for, not going to be much of a leader. And so I think more time needs to be spent on power skills, especially as the advent of AI becomes more and more intrusive and powerful in the way we do our work, right? It's the counterbalance to artificial intelligence is human intelligence. And I think HR has a huge role to play. And I think leaders need to be constantly aware of those things that make us uniquely human, right? Compassion, thinking about the impact it has on other people. So that's important to me.
Yeah, it's important. So I teach at two universities. I teach at American University in Dubai, and from time to time I'll do a project at Howard University in Washington, D.C. I enjoy those more than I do anything else. I enjoy talking to younger people coming in, and they don't know where this road is going to lead, but maybe they've had a couple of detours. That to me is the perfect venue that I could just lay it out. I'm not going to give you a solution, but let's just talk through in the same way that you're trying to find that sweet spot.
Yeah. And I think universities and colleges need to spend more time teaching about leadership skills, not just finance and supply chain, but how do you really show up as a leader? And those are the skills that will really make you marketable as a leader.
You ever given any thought to maybe doing a course at Cornell, going back there and saying,
So,
okay,
it's funny that you asked me, Ron. I was 4 and out. So I got my undergraduate degree at Cornell, never went back to school. And most institutions of higher ed require an advanced degree. I can guest lecture, but I can't actually qualify as an adjunct or, certainly not as a full professor.
I yeah. I think that is so backwards thinking in today's climate because based on that, a lot of the so-called tech bros could not make it because a lot of those people dropped out of
Dropped
school.
out. That's right, dropped
They
out.
dropped
Yeah,
out.
I think it's a missed opportunity. I think I have something to offer with my 30 years of experience, even if it's not backed by, an MS of some sort.
Yeah, you have so many educational credits. So what is that going to do? But one of the things I've noticed that whenever I go and teach a class, I have a lot of people to teach inside of the HR department sitting in the room and they're taking notes because I'm real world. You may have the research papers and all those kinds of things, but it's totally different.
Yeah, practitioner experience in the classroom is an important balance, right?
Yes,
To the
yes.
theory. Yeah.
Mm. So how do you stay ahead of learning? So Harvard Business Publishing does a lot of research and all those kinds of things. At this stage, how do you learn? How do you stay ahead of the curve, if we can call it that, in understanding the transformation in say human resources, the transformation in say leadership? What is
So
your style?
I read a lot of HBR to be
Yeah,
sure.
yeah.
Right. There's still the preeminent source on leadership and management practices. I attend a lot of conferences. I listen to podcasts. I try and learn from other CHROs, from other business leaders. I try to network and get plugged in. Again, it all goes back to listening. And I love to listen to other people and hear what they have to say and then think about how it's most adaptable for me and my own style. And are there things that I can pick up? And the learning is a never ending journey. So,
So one of the things you did not mention for the audience is that you speak at a lot of conferences.
oh,
We met at a conference.
we did,
Yes.
Ron.
And
Yeah.
I've kind of followed through P World. I see, oh, you're on this point. You in Canada here. Now you're moving, you're doing all this kind of things. So you didn't quite say that. You said, well, I go to conference and I sit and listen, which I find hard to do. But again, you're not just checking out and saying, okay, I'm here. I got everything I need and I'm not going to do that. So that continuous learning is important.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I
Yeah.
don't think you can preach to others that continuous learning is important if you're not willing to be a student yourself, right? So,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not on all the times. There are days now, especially where my brain just needs a break, right? It reaches a saturation
Yeah.
point,
Yeah.
which is the other thing that's nice about my rewirement, Ron. I'm working on a 1,000-piece puzzle because I can.
Yeah.
Um, and it's nice to be able to take a break and exercise a different part of my brain.
Yeah.
Because that balance is important.
Mm. Have you given any thought to putting it all down in a book?
I have. Boy, Ron, you're just tapping into all my dreams and aspirations. There's a piece of work that I developed at an organization. It's a career pathing framework.
Okay.
And I've shared it with hundreds of HR professionals now. I'm actually going to be speaking on it in a couple conferences in the coming weeks. And I think that I would love to write a book as a how-to for other organizations because
Mm.
we know that career development, professional development is important for employees to stay engaged. They want to be able to envision themselves staying at the organization so long as there are opportunities for growth.
Hmm.
And so many still don't yet have a thoughtful and intentional roadmap for employees to follow and for managers
Yeah.
to execute. So I'm thinking about perhaps putting that together in a book. I just got to
Hey,
find time
there
to
we
do that
go.
among all the other things I want to do.
Let us know so we can have you back here and you can walk us through that framework as to how that's done. Um, when I was at Martha Stewart, we developed a career conversation. And a young lady in the training department, she had developed this kind of same framework that you're talking about. And so every new employee, because when we were hiring people, they were basically right out of college, 1 or 2 years out of college, and they were trying to figure out what they were going to do. And to try to get them to thinking beyond the job. And she developed this framework, and every new employee, they receive 1 hour of career coaching.
Oh, wow.
Maggie Missile, if you're listening, that was Maggie's program. 1 hour, and they were able to, and they still stay in touch with everyone because of that, because it gave them a pause to think about what's next. What do I do next? if this job doesn't work out, what am I going to do? I'm just doing this for, because, and when I had the conversation with her, I said, how did that come about? And she went to school to become an accountant, because the advice was, you become an accountant, you'll always have a job. And she had one summer as an internship or whatever it was. She said, I knew then I could not do this
Not do it.
for the rest of my life. And that's how she was able to change that. So I want to ask you, one of the questions we always ask is that, if you're talking about your daughters and you're coaching them through next level and having these kind of conversations, what advice would you give your younger self? If you could talk to your younger self at their age now, looking back on your career.
It's always the interesting space-time continuum question, right? If I go back in time and I make different choices, would I end up where I am today?
Yeah.
I would tell myself to make the same decisions, but be less hard on myself.
Okay.
The failures are equally instructive, in some ways a
Learn
greater
more.
teaching moment than your
Yeah.
successes.
Yeah.
And I would beat myself up mercilessly.
Mhm.
Because I was still trying to demonstrate that I would never make a mistake, that I would always be right.
Mhm.
And I think once I learned to forgive myself of those and just do better the next time, show up. I always remember tomorrow was another day to just be better.
Mhm.
You can't be perfect, but
Yeah.
you can be better than you were the day before.
Yeah.
And if that starts with a mea culpa, if that starts with an I'm sorry, or if that's with, wow, I messed that up and I own that,
Yeah.
that's better.
Mm.
And that when you mean that earnestly and sincerely, you will find more forgiveness than you think you deserve.
Yeah. Mm.
And so once I learned to give myself that grace, mistakes were not so scary. And I think that's what I would tell myself.
One of the interesting thoughts that you just mentioned was that you learn more from failures. Failure was a more powerful teacher in a lot of cases than what success is. I've always found that myself.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the highs are high, but the pains are so earth-shattering, right? And you think about all the consequences of that. The successes just mean you have to do more success.
Yeah.
Right. I'm like, oh, you just keep raising the bar on yourself. And at some
Yeah.
point that becomes unsustainable. Whereas the failures and the disappointments are things that you bounce back from. They teach you resilience. They teach you grit. They teach you humility. And all of those, I think, are things that are good for leadership.
Yeah. Yeah. Very good for leadership. So if when you look back on your career, was there one person or group that was very influential in getting you to where you are today?
Yeah, and I was just thinking the other day that I really ought to reach out to him. He was the first vice president when I started out of school. I was a lowly HR associate. He was the VP of the region, a gentleman by the name of Jim Lawler.
Okay.
And he really took me under his wing. And he didn't just teach me about HR. He taught me about how to navigate relationships, people. He defended me at times when I needed it. He never shied away from calling me out or holding me accountable, but he just really displayed that he had confidence in my abilities. And I so needed that starting out. And to get it from someone who was at such a high level in the organization was deeply meaningful and significant. And that was at the start of my career. That was 28 years ago.
Yeah.
And I think it did so much to help me become who I am today.
Reaching back and pulling people forward. What is your mentoring role look like now? So you're out of the game for the most part. You still play mentoring role with your daughters coming into your kids coming into the space. What does your giving back look like from your side now?
So I do a lot. I try to do a lot for the AAPI community, the Asian American Pacific Islander community.
Okay.
Because again, I believe that advocacy is important, and particularly now in the States where diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts are under attack. We really need to make sure that this community holds together and uses their collective voice. We are going to be the largest minority group in the next decade.
Really?
And behind that is incredible economic power, but underutilized political power.
Yeah.
Asians are not likely to run for office. They're not likely to vote. And we need to get better about that.
Okay.
So it's not just career development that I'm advocating for. I'm also a supporter of a group that's trying to bring Asian curriculum into public schools to teach about Asian history in the same
Yeah.
way that Black
Yeah.
American history
Yeah.
is important, right? If
Yeah.
we forget where we came from, then we're doomed to repeat it. And we're
Exactly.
seeing that play out right now.
Mm.
So that's one piece of the work that I'm doing. The other piece that I'm doing is just mentoring people actually at all career stages. I had someone who was a vice president just want to pick my brain. It's not just early
Yeah.
career folks.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's not just Asians, right? It's
Yeah.
anybody
Yeah.
who's looking for help. I'm happy to give of my time because I think that's important for this HR community.
Mm-hmm.
And then the last piece is just spending more time with my family. I want to do more traveling. I really want to try paddleboarding. There's a woman who in the summer goes by on a paddleboard and she just looks fantastically zen and her abs are killer. Like she's got
Yeah.
a core like nobody else's business.
Yeah.
Like I want that life.
Yeah.
So I'll be doing some of that this summer too, Ron.
Okay. Okay. That's cool. Cool. That's a good way. Well, I would have said that's a good way to relieve the stress, but that's a good way to just get into you and you're out there on the water and you're just thinking it through from there. Yeah.
That's right.
So one of the goals of the show it was to bring together people like yourselves in walking through their so-called career journey. And when you think about what you were doing, so that question that I was going to ask, but you kind of walked through that. What were you most excited about? You sound as if you pretty much have a plan for this next phase, whatever this next phase is. And that could be a learning point because you could start here and then maybe there's something else that comes up. Would you say?
And I think that's the point, Ron, is I want to be so much more intentional with
Yeah.
this time, right? I don't want to squander it. I don't want to waste it. Unless my plan is, you know what, this afternoon, I'm just going to do nothing.
Okay.
And there's goodness in that too, but I
Yeah.
don't want to just find myself sort of floating around and then find that it's December. I mean, my goodness, it's practically going to be April. It's going to be Easter right around the corner when it just felt like it was Christmas.
Yeah.
So time is fleeting and it's finite, and
Yeah.
I don't want to waste it.
Yeah. Okay. That sounds so cool. You know what? It's always good for me to talk to people like yourselves who pretty much, I'm going to say, pretty much figured it out. At least you figured it out in your parlance as to where I'm headed in doing that. So as we begin the process of closing out, what would you like to leave the audience with? What is the statement you'd like to leave the audience with for their future or whatever it could be?
Find the organizational courage to stand up for what you believe in, to make allies with the people you disagree with, but be a force for good.
Okay.
And don't tolerate environments, don't tolerate people around you who don't make you better. Life's too short.
Yeah, I said those are energy drainers, Duracell peak battery.
Vampires, that's right.
Who's sucking the energy out of that battery that you said, oh gosh, at the end of the day, I'm just wasted because I had to deal with so much,
That's right.
over that period of time.
That's right.
So I want to thank you for being a guest on the show. And so what I'd like to do is if all the people that's listening in from whichever platform you're listening in, and subscribe to our channel so that we can grow our base. And on Wednesday, we do a rebroadcast. It's called Rebroadcast Wednesday, where we take a snippet of your interview and we use that as a lead-in across the social media platform, because maybe somebody did not get a chance to listen to it on Friday mornings and they can listen to it later in the week. So thank you so much. I need you to kind of hang on for a minute
You bet.
as we begin to close out. Thank you
so much, Ron.
Okay.
Take the CEO series with you anywhere, anytime. All episodes are now available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and major streaming platforms. It's not just an interview. It's a masterclass in leadership.